Hey everybody, we are waiting on the Minneapolis court to release the jury and announce the verdict that they reached in the murder trial of ex-police officer Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd. So here we are, right here. If I can turn this around. Rear camera, there that is. There that is. So,
like Tashira said earlier, put our arms around each other and just love each other today.
And what will guilty verdicts mean to Minneapolis? What will it mean to Minnesota?
I think it'll mean change. It'll mean change. It's a first step in a long road to recovery. We have a lot of work to do in Minneapolis, but I believe Floyd came here for a reason. This is a sacred, sacred land, and we need to start respecting that again. And I know that that is what he would want. Floyd was attached to this city. He was attached to the lakes, particularly Lake Muskoka, and I know that it happened here for a reason. Maybe we are the epicenter for change. Maybe we're making the world look at things in a different way. I'm not sure, but I know it definitely started that momentum.
And why so important to be standing in this physical space right now?
I think so many of us have a lot of negative experiences with the government. This is not a comfortable place for many of us to be or to look at, though it represents our city. And I love Hennepin County, and I always stand for 612 Minneapolis. That's my city. But at the same time, I've had many bad encounters here. And so I think it's time that we show what this building is supposed to be about. And it's supposed to be about justice. So it needs to that.
well, folks, this is supposed to be read any minute.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you very much. Very good luck to you.
That's CNN we have on.
I want to show you one other thing that's happening down here.
And
all the way on this side.
I'm actually
barbecue, and there
adjusting
not quite a celebration, but certainly a relief.
my computer, among other things,
that this is going to be
for this.
On all
So,
if it's not, that may be
it's
even a bigger problem. Jake?
Yeah, you just heard there from
do hope it's
Ross, the
guilty on all counts.
of George Floyd,
The way the trial went,
that it will be
it'll be
guilty
shocking.
verdict, and that hopefully this will bring about
Let's see.
some unity in the United States. Miguel
We've
Marquez,
got
thank
going
you so
here,
much. I want to go now, straight to CNN. Sarah
with,
Seidner, she's live outside the government building, the courthouse
there.
in Minnesota. And Sarah, you've been talking to the Floyd family. What are they telling you?
So I just heard from Philonise Floyd, George Floyd's brother, and reminding folks that he was also the person that the day after he laid his brother to rest, he went to Congress and spoke in front of them for the George Floyd Policing Act. And so he is hoping for reform, but right now he is up in the courtroom. He told me that he was pacing, getting ready to go into the court to hear this verdict. He is now in the court, and he said to me, after all of this, for him, he has had a really hard time sleeping. And he said, I haven't been able to sleep throughout much of this. And he said, maybe hearing this verdict will finally help me get some sleep. And in his mind, he wants the verdict to be a certain way, and he said if it goes that way, then he might.
And hey, everybody is wondering if my friend Van Jones is going to cry. Van's name has become a Twitter trend because they're saying they just know that Van is going to cry when the verdict comes in. And so someone has a photograph of him right here. As you can see,
commented about so many people across America from
tearing up.
different creeds and colors who came out.
Laundry Day says, "Hey Zinni, I'm so nervous right now."
I see all the
I'm not nervous. Are you nervous, Mom?
Whether it be in the streets or in the
No,
halls of Congress, I
I'm
see
afraid to be
all
nervous.
of the
I want
people
this to
who
be guilty
have
so
stood
bad.
up
I
for
love
justice
this
and
country
stood up
so much, and I
for
just
his brother and
really
against what
want
happened
to
to
see
his
it
brother. So
approved.
right
My
now,
mom says
he
that
is inside of
she
the court,
wants to see a
waiting
guilty
for just
verdict so
like all
bad.
of
She
us.
loves this country so much, and
It does sound,
I agree.
Floyd, George
I don't
Floyd's brother,
know
like
if
George
I'm
Floyd's
hardened
girlfriend, Courtney Ross,
It's just that I think they came to this decision really quick. So I would be surprised if it was anything other than guilty on all counts.
Absolutely. The reason for that
and
is he has said this over and over to me.
They ought to be handing out that verdict like
like
it's candy, because
and he believes
how many times
that
can you
no
watch a
one
video
could
like
watch
that
the video alone,
and come away
and not
without
come back
anything
with a
other than
verdict.
guilty? You know what I
He
mean?
also
That's
realized, after we talked and I told him that the verdict had been reached, he said there were no questions, and he noticed there were no questions by the jurors in this case, and to him that was a sign that they had looked at all of the evidence in the trial, and that they didn't need to rewatch it again and relook at it all again because they hadn't made a decision. And he believes that decision will be guilty, but again, we have to be very careful.
That's why
It is the 12 people, the 12 jurors that were chosen that makes that decision, and we're going to hear that decision very shortly.
All right, Sarah Seidner, thanks so much. We'll come back to you in a moment. Let's go now to a different part of Minneapolis. Adrian brought us, is in a different part, I think downtown, near a police precinct. Tell us what's happening where you are.
Hey there, Jake. We're about a half mile from the Hennepin County Government Center. If you look behind me, you'll notice a crew with the city is installing more concrete barriers just in front of the roadway that leads to the police department. On the other side of that truck, there's a gate. That gate wasn't there earlier today. It was delivered and installed moments before we learned jurors had reached a verdict. On the other side of the police department, the businesses here, Lola Red, have put up more boards to protect their building. When this verdict, the news came that the verdict was reached, we were inside of a church at 38th in Chicago. If you sit down inside of the sanctuary, that church, and look out the window, you can see George Floyd Square. You see where Floyd took the final moments of his life. We shared with the pastor that we were speaking with for another story. The jury has reached a verdict. He and his wife said their heart dropped, but they found a bit of comfort knowing the jury reached the verdict so quickly. And one thing they also pointed out, so many have asked him, what do you think the outcome will be? He said they're not necessarily worried about the outcome. The bigger question at
Laundry
this
Day
hour
says
is
if
what is most important.
I'm reading this,
and they talked about humanity.
and
He talked about the people
Laundry
he
Day.
served for nearly 40 years on that corner.
Laundry
Like
Day
Floyd,
reads,
he moved to Minneapolis
wrote,
from Texas.
if Van Jones
And
starts
like other
crying,
people
he
in
should
that
be slapped for
community,
overdoing it.
issues with members of law
Oh,
enforcement
man.
at a young age.
So I remember Van when he was just a local guy in Oakland. But he wrote a book called The Green Collar Economy, and that got him the job in the White House under the Obama administration. And he got bounced out of that just as rapidly because of past claims of support of communism or some jazz like that. It's just BS stuff that Breitbart came up with. And but he recovered nicely. Certainly did. So let's see where we are. We are. Go back here. There. I'm trying to go back to the TV screen
Adrian
here.
Broadus, thanks so much. I want to go back to CNN's Don Lemon. And Don, one of the most remarkable things about this trial and about the George Floyd case, and I don't know if my team has those murals, the pictures of those murals ready, but there have been pictures, paintings, murals of George Floyd around the world, in Pakistan, in England, all over, as a symbol of injustice at the hands of the government. This case has taken on a truly international meaning, representing the idea of people who do not deserve it being put down, being killed, being oppressed by their governments, often because of racism, but also just in general, government versus people.
Yeah, and it all started in Minneapolis in what is now George Floyd Square. There was no George Floyd Square there, obviously, before this happened. But it has also transformed.
So we're live
in
at
many
Zenny
ways to
62
a Black
here,
Lives
folks.
Matter way, which is
So
in
we're waiting.
D.C., where you live, Jake. But I think the reason it's become such a symbol is obviously because, number one, I really do think that it's because of the attention that this particular case got because we were in quarantine and because people didn't know where their lives were going, what was going to happen next. because we didn't know if our loved ones were going to be sick, and or if we were going to be sick, or what was going to happen from moment to moment, if we were going to have a job or so on. We have to remember where we were a year ago, and not very far, along in a year from now, a couple months, at May 25th. We're basically sort of in the same place. So we were all sitting at home in quarantine. And I think the whole world is watching because because the world looks to America as a symbol of democracy. And if there's any place on earth that can guarantee freedom and that can guarantee what the Constitution says, that we are in search of a more perfect union, there's no other place on earth than the United States. And to see this atrocity happen on a city street in the middle of the day in the United States was just something that people could not wrap their heads around it worldwide. People in America couldn't as well.
I know I couldn't.
People of color particularly,
believe
it was a
it.
confirmation of all those things that people say, well, maybe it's an exaggeration and what have you, but it was confirmation. I think for many people around the world, it was just sheer, they were just stunned, and they couldn't believe something like that was happening in the United States and not in some war zone or some third world country.
So just to take a step back, the Black Lives Matter movement, as I recall first hearing about it, was in 2015 after the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. And if we go back, not even 6 full years, and I don't mean to pick on Hillary Clinton, but Hillary Clinton, who certainly is somebody who is allied with civil rights, first asked about this.
Oh, folks, it's 4:46, by the way, if you're wondering what time it is. It's 4:46 in the
East. A lot of
East.
politicians did at that time, saying, "Oh, well, all lives matter." Now we're at a point, almost 6 years later, after all of these different cases, and maybe crescendoing with the death of George Floyd, that because of the pandemic, as you know, but also because of how horrifying this video was, this 9 minutes and 29 seconds of a police officer with his knee on the neck of George Floyd, while children begged the policeman to get off his neck, and he didn't. To the point that you have Mitt Romney marching with the Black Lives Matter movement in Washington, D.C. in 2020. It is a sea change in the culture, a sea change. Do you agree?
Well, I think it's a sea change in awareness, not necessarily in practice. And so we will see what happens with this verdict. But it was not just Black Lives Matter, right? And because many people didn't see, and it's so easy to see if you just added the word to, T-O-O at the end, or also, Black Lives Matter also, or Black Lives Matter too. And then I think it helps people understand what you mean by that. Not that all lives, don't matter.
Right.
Black Lives Matter because that's what we're talking about.
Right.
At
Because
this point,
we're
it's
so
obvious
persecuted,
that
that's
other
why.
lives, that it's obvious that Black Lives
Nobody
Matter.
acts like
But it
they
wasn't just
matter.
Black Lives Matter.
That
Remember,
makes
it was
it
Colin
simple.
Kaepernick
You just
who
didn't
took a knee
act like it mattered.
for injustice, police injustice, and for reform in this country.
Oh, let's
And
let the
then you
people know
had
we matter too.
Derek
You leave
Chauvin
us out of
with
everything.
his knee
You hire us
on
last.
George Floyd's
You
neck.
put,
At first,
you
we
lie
thought
on
8 minutes
us.
and 46
All
seconds,
kinds of
and now
stuff. You don't
when
give
the
us
trial started, we
education.
learned that it was 9
You kept
minutes
us
and
in
29
slavery for 100
Right.
years.
And
Well,
so
yeah, that's what they mean when they say Black Lives Matter.
Remember, there was very fine people
That's
on both
my
sides.
mom,
People
folks.
said, okay,
She's-
this is nuts.
Giving us some
Then
history
there was
there.
Ahmaud Arbery.
sorry.
We can't forget how horrific that video is. Horrific what happened to Ahmaud Arbery. But how horrific the video is of Ahmaud Arbery jogging down the street and then being shot with a shotgun. And we see it.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
hear what happens to
Yeah.
Breonna Taylor in her bedroom. And then the death of George Floyd. So there have been a number of things that have led to this. But yes, a sea change in awareness. We'll see if it's in practice when this verdict is read.
Don, we'll come back to you in a sec. CNN's Omar Jimenez is at George Floyd Square in Minneapolis at the site of this alleged crime. Omar, what's it like there?
Jake, well, a crowd has started to grow here, of course, in anticipation of a verdict, as you hear people start to chant as well. But when you make your way over to the spot where George Floyd took some of his final breaths, you see that, of course, the memorial aspect of this is still here, but then when you pan up and look over to the left, you see how many people have started to form. Some of them, of course, press here in this moment, but people are anxious. They want the results in this trial. They want the verdict. One woman we spoke to, who actually seems to be leading some of the chants right now, said that it doesn't matter for her what the verdict is.
That we're going to be out here.
Oakland Police Chief Armstrong, he's calling for calm.
You know, we're asking community as they gather to respect our merchants and our business owners that have been vandalized and damages to their businesses. You know, this is a difficult time for everybody, and for our merchants and businesses to have to repair damage and vandalism because of some that choose to, you know, to bust windows and use, you know, violence to make their point. I think it's just not appropriate, and we don't want it in the city of Oakland. This is a city that appreciates social justice and people exercising their First Amendment rights. We fully support that, but what we don't support is vandalizing and damaging our businesses. And so really, I want to say to our business owners, you know, that I'm sorry this happened this weekend. I want to reassure them that we're going to do everything we can to keep their businesses safe and free of vandalism. But what happened last Friday is just unacceptable, and it doesn't help the community heal.
With this verdict, does this now
Yeah, so that's Chief Lerone Armstrong. He's
here in Minneapolis.
basically calling for calm via Twitter.
And to the courtroom, to the government center, and announce their unanimous decision.
I think there's another way you could do that, but that's another story. Anyway, here we are.
They have to say. We understand that President Biden at the White House is at his TV, watching, waiting to find out what the verdict will be. Let's bring in Anderson Cooper and his panel. Anderson?
Jake, thank you very much. Appreciate it. When the jury does come, and we're not sure if they've been, do you believe that they've been sequestered at the hotel and that's where they came up with the verdict?
We believe so. That's where they have been sequestered for the evenings at a hotel. They could come and talk to their families and communicate, but they were deliberating very late last night, and the assumption is that they are being transported to the courthouse or in some part of this. Remember, you were able to hand over notes through Zoom because they didn't want to bring the defendant, the counsel, everyone in. The jury never goes in the room to actually hand over the question to the judge. It's always sort of done in this distance way to give them their
So what's going to happen once they are brought back, but whether they're there now or not, when they actually are back in the courtroom, what happens?
They're going to sit in the jury box the way they have been through the entire trial. The foreman will hand the jury verdict to the judge, who will then review it quickly, ask if they've all been able to lead to a unanimous verdict, which has to happen, in Minnesota. It must be unanimous.
At this stage, does the judge already know what the verdict is?
Yeah, usually the judge gets a look in advance. He knows what's coming. He will ask the foreperson of the jury, count one, how do you find? Guilty or not guilty? The foreperson will read the verdict. We'll do that times 3. And then the next big thing that happens, if there is a conviction, the prosecution often seeks to remand the defendant, to send him into jail.
It's not going to change.
You get a sense of the crowd that has grown fairly quickly. You see people who are on bikes. You see a vendor down the hill there that came out fairly quickly. It just gives you an idea. This is something that people were ready for. People were watching and waiting. They knew this verdict was happening, especially when we got to the closing arguments yesterday.
He's off to prison.
So he might be able to go home, or he might actually directly go to prison.
Well, sometimes it's called a step back oftentimes, right? And they could be able to do it because this is a murder conviction. It's not one that's a non-violent crime. Sometimes judges will give the luxury of being able to settle one's affairs before being brought in. But of course, Derek Chauvin, if he is convicted of murder charges, one or more, or any of them, then there is a presumption that he is no longer able to have the benefit of freedom. But again, this is not a sentencing opportunity yet. This will be the conviction or acquittal moment. The judge will still have to determine, often through a report, there'll be discussions about remorse, etc. He'll fill out some paperwork. We'll talk to the equivalent of a probation officer about his views on the crime and what he has done to sort of guide the opportunity in the judge's hand to say, what am I dealing with? What type of criminal or felon am I dealing with now? Am I talking about somebody who's likely to be a recidivist, who will return to a life of crime? Somebody who needs treatment in other ways? All this holistic sentencing will take place before
Laundry Day says, I hope there is calm if there is violence. Let it not be protesters. If the police resort to rubber bullets or tear gas, let the story be that
Maybe they
no.
know something
how we
ain't gonna
can
happen right.
rehabilitate offenders.
That's why they're holding
Van
up.
Jones, obviously people are listening very closely to or is it going to be conviction on all counts? Will be. How much does that matter in terms of the public's response? I think it matters a lot.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, if there's an acquittal, it's completely devastating. But if it's just the lower one, he's negligent, that didn't feel negligent. That didn't look like negligence. And so I do think that it matters. If just all three, I think you're going to feel a level of vindication for this movement and for this community. And don't forget, this is not the only case in that area. I've talked to people on the ground there. What you have to understand about this, where this is happening, it's the most livable place, and it also has the biggest disparities. In other words, it's a great place to be white, and it's a terrible place to be black. That's what everybody tells me. And they say the level of friction between the Hmong community there, the Somali community there, the black community there, and the police is unreal. They say they feel like they're in a war zone all the time. Then you bring in all these troops. You have a grieving community that's already traumatized, and now you have police and troops everywhere. So they are literally just on pins and needles. If you have a complete vindication of what all these grassroots groups have been saying, then there's relief.
Maybe
but
it's
if you
not
come back with
guilty.
just one
They're
charge,
waiting
and then
too long.
the sentencing guidelines give you,
I think part of it is if they're sequestered in another place, they've got to get them out of there
we have several hours
to the
now
court,
of time where we are
and
waiting this verdict. Law enforcement also
that
has
takes
to try
time
to figure out, obviously,
as
they've been
well.
going
So,
over contingency plans for quite some time.
I mean, whoever set the time.
I mean, you have to be
Didn't set it
prepared
right
whether
because
there's an acquittal or whether there's a...
Yeah, I don't know who set the time.
You're going to have in many cities people
Yeah.
take to the
I never
streets,
heard of
either
no
in
wait this
celebration or
Oh,
because
I
they're
have.
upset because
Yeah.
of the verdict.
I
You have to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
ready no matter what.
No, not
Unfortunately,
when something like
they
this.
have
It's
some
all,
experience because in
you
May,
always
when
wait.
Usually when you
Floyd,
say that
there was
they're
a
ready,
lot of unrest.
they're
And
ready.
so many
Yeah.
of the areas where you know you had unrest, you're going to already have your platoons out there to be able to protect strip malls and different places like that where you're likely to have some
Yeah.
issues. And you want to
I
be
think
able to
there's
have
an
people
issue
just
myself.
celebrate and you
Might
know,
be right.
express their
Yeah.
First Amendment rights at the same time. So you got to have that balance there. And I think right now that's what's been taking place. There's been a lot of preparation. There's been a lot of conference calls between major
The thing
city
about it is, I
chiefs,
remember when
conference of mayors,
Johannes Meserly was shot.
talking about the things that went
in
bad.
Laundry Day says I would not want to be a
So we don't
juror on
repeat
this
the same mistakes
case
in
regardless of
May.
the decision. No,
And
I
that's
remember,
important.
folks, when
You also,
let me get
have
this real
on
quick.
the other side that you-
I remember when Johannes
you gotta try to have
Meserly
some
was on
public
trial for
order
shooting
and
Oscar
things,
Grant.
but you also
I
have
thought
these
he was going to be
grassroots
convicted.
organizations
Oh,
begging,
I still can't believe
saying,
that
"You have
happened.
now
She's
too much police presence on us. You got these
But they said
Humvees, you have all
Minneapolis
this
is
stuff,
the
and the
worst
young
place in
people
the
feel
world
that they
for
are being
black
pushed up
people.
against
So
the
what do you
wall.
Well, this has been
They need
Minneapolis,
the space
though.
to grieve.
And I'm talking
They need the
about
space
I'm
to
talking about
celebrate, and they need
right
the
now.
space to be able
that's
to do
that's
it the right
Minneapolis,
way.
not
And so
Indiana. That's
sometimes,
not
you
that's
know,
Minneapolis.
you're in a tough
Well,
situation if you're
Minnesota,
a local
Minneapolis,
government there,
whatever,
because
Right.
if you
Twin
don't have
Cities,
enough
whatever.
presence,
It's the
you can get in
area I'm
trouble.
talking
You can
about.
also
Yeah.
overdo it. And so what my
They
my
said
hope
that's the worst place
is
for
that
black
you have.
people.
Let me just give some praise to some of these groups.
It used to not be.
Black
Whatever
Business
happened
Collective,
over the
Reclaim the
years, because
Block,
Wade,
Minnesota Youth Collective,
Wade,
Take
who I
Action
grew up with,
Minnesota,
he went to
ACER,
Minneapolis and
Movement Voter Project,
met a
those
wife
young
and
people
did
did
really
not.
well.
When the
And
counts
she was
were there,
white.
when they weren't.
Remember that?
Keeping
Well,
the
most
schools
black
going.
men up
They
there
need space
marry
to
white
protest
women.
tonight
But I'm
safely.
saying that-
We would celebrate tonight safely.
I don't
hope
know.
they get
Hey,
it.
John Marks, how you
Though, is
doing?
We have a Pavlovian response in America that when we have impending verdicts and you see buildings
John
start
Marks,
to be
welcome.
boarded
The
up
legendary
and
John
businesses
Marks is
start to
here.
close,
John,
that
what do you think
trust
about
gap
all this?
that's already there between our justice system and members
John's
of the
asked,
community,
what's up?
it expands
That's a funny
exponentially,
question.
because in their minds they say, you're preparing me for
Uh,
an acquittal. You are telling me if it's boarded up, anticipate.
So
my
everybody
arrest,
give me your
my
thoughts
wrath,
on this as we
anticipate
lead toward this. I'm going to turn right back. John Marks says hi, by the way, Mom.
Part of what you're seeing, the needs you're speaking about, Van, is that Pavlovian reflex, a response to say, what does this mean if you are calling out the National Guard? People believe, did you get a heads up, Governor? Did you get a heads up, Mr. President? Did you get a heads up, Judge?
Yeah,
Do you know
that's
something
what
that
I'm
we
thinking.
do not know?
They're ready
and
for
finally, the point that
rioting,
you
because they
raised,
know
Don, I mean,
they
excuse me,
rioted.
Van, about the difference between how people will compare and what negligence looks like. Minnesota has a very specific and recent memory of what second-degree charges look like, second-degree manslaughter, because Geronimo Jimenez, who killed Philando Castile, charged and acquitted with the second-degree manslaughter charge. Does that feel the same way for George Floyd to people? You have the officer, now resigned, Kim Potter, who killed Dante Wright. same charge. Does that feel the same way of that 9 minutes and 29 seconds? And so you've got a population of people, human beings, who are saying, well, if I'm going to compare, this doesn't feel like those cases. And if that's all he gets, this is going to be something that might contribute to that trust gap widening.
Let's go back to
Real quick, if I can just respond to something Van said. One of the things that was discussed is
You
not
can't rush the court.
heavy-handed approach immediately. If you need to have
Court's the
people
court.
in riot gear and so forth, have them out of sight. Stage them someplace out of sight. They can respond quickly. You start off as low a level as you can.
Let's go back to Jake.
Thank you, Anderson. We are standing by for the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial to be announced any minute. I'm going to hand it over to CNN's Wolf Blitzer right now. Wolf?
Jake, thanks very much. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. We're picking up our special coverage of the Chauvin trial. Verdict expected momentarily. Joining us, Anderson Cooper and Don Lemon. I want to go to Sarah Seidner first. She's on the scene for us in Minneapolis. She's right at the courthouse where we expect this verdict fairly soon, right, Sarah? Looks like we have to reconnect with Sarah Seidner. We're going to try to reconnect with her momentarily. We're also watching all of this unfold with Don Lemon and Anderson Cooper. Let me bring in Don Lemon right now. Don, you got some thoughts on what we can anticipate?
I do have some thoughts, Wolf, and just so you know, I've been in communication with Ben Crump, the family attorney, and I asked him, I said, what can I say right now? Are you optimistic? Are you cautious? Who is with you? What's the mood? Where are you? And he said, Philonis and I are in the courthouse. He said, the family has faith that Derek Chauvin will be found criminally liable for killing George Floyd. And again, that's from Ben Crump, the family attorney. And as has been reported earlier, that Philonis Floyd, the brother of George Floyd, is going to be in the courtroom when the verdict is read, and he is there now with the family attorney. And the family, I would imagine, it together, and they are cautiously optimistic that considering the time that it took the jury to deliberate, Wolf, and come up with a verdict that is going to be at least in their favor. Not exactly sure how they're going to rule on all the charges, but there you go. That is the latest from the family and the attorney, Wolf Blitzer.
Yeah, we're going to be checking back with them all the time. Sarah Seidner, we just managed to reconnect with you, Sarah. First of all, tell us where you are and tell us what you're seeing.
All right, so we are right across the street from the Hennepin County Government Center where the court is. We know that George Floyd's brother, Philonis Floyd, is inside of the court. We know that we have our reporter inside of the court as well, Josh Campbell. He is there to listen to the jury read the verdict. We are awaiting. We know that Derek Chauvin is inside the court as well. Chauvin went in about 8 minutes past 3 local time, so 4:08 your time.
For those of you who
is waiting for the jury
are wondering, Derek Chauvin faces 3 charges: second-degree murder, killing someone in the course of committing another felony, third-degree murder, death that occurs when someone is acting without regard to human life, and second-degree manslaughter, which is death by culpable negligence.
That's where a lot of folks have been brought into the court, in and out of the court in cars. And then if you look to my left, you will see a little grassy knoll there, and just beyond that there are dozens of people that have gathered, some of whom knew George Floyd well, and who are here to speak their piece. And we do know that the family will be speaking within an hour after the verdict is read. We also know that we heard from Philonis Floyd just before he went into court. He said he was pacing, that he has been patient, but he is pacing right before he went in. He said, look, I am hoping that this verdict helps me finally get some sleep.
Oh, by the way, folks, each count,
he hasn't really been able to
while she's saying about that, I think it's important that you know that each count carries different sentences. A count of second-degree murder carries a sentence of up to 40 years in prison. A count of third-degree murder carries a sentence of up to 25 years in prison. And a count of second-degree manslaughter carries a sentence of up to 10 years in prison.
There are folks that are already in tears. There are folks that are worried about what this jury is going to do. And so you also have another case not too far from here, a few miles from here, where another black man unarmed was shot and killed by police in Brooklyn Center. And
700 Club's Pat Robertson said put him under the jail.
Very tense scene, and it is why, and I'll give you a look, the media is of course here from around the world. This building is the Star Tribune building, which is one of the newspapers here, the newspaper here, and you can see it's boarded up as well as almost every single other building downtown here and around
Yeah, John
other
Marks, I
parts
can't
of the
see an
city as
acquittal
well,
either.
including near Georgetown Square, where dozens of people
Says,
have already gathered there too.
on that he
We're gonna
says
stay
20
very
years,
close touch with you,
25.
sir. I want to bring in Omar Jimenez. He's also
I think
on the scene
40.
for us. Omar, tell us where
You
you
know, I'd be
are
surprised
and
if
what
he
you're
didn't get
seeing.
40. 25 or 40.
Right now, Wolf, we are at George Floyd Square. This is ground zero for where George
Oh,
Floyd.
here's the judge. Okay, folks.
All right, hold on.
Here we go,
Omar.
folks.
This is the judge, the Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill.
Here we go, folks.
All rise for the jury. All right, please be seated. Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict. Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court file number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same
That's
caption, verdict count 2.
Up to
We, the
40
jury, in the
years.
above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty.
Wow, three-bagger. Guilty on all counts. Guilty on all counts.
I'm now going to ask you individually if these are
Guilty.
correct verdicts. Please respond yes or
Guilty.
no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Guilty.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Guilty. Fucking
Juror number
guilty.
19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Guilty on all
Juror number
counts.
27, are these
Guilty
your true
on
and
all
correct verdicts?
counts. Guilty on, I gotta say this.
Number 44.
Guilty on all counts. Man.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yeah.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct
Yeah.
verdicts?
Yes.
Juror
Yeah.
number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
The devil got, hey, he's gonna be sorry the devil got in his head, boy.
Jesus Christ, thank you, Jesus.
Devil got in his head.
Thank you,
And
Jesus.
wow.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
Juror number 92, are these your
This
true
is
and correct
awesome.
verdicts?
Thank you, Jesus.
I think
Thank
your
you,
verdicts will
Jesus.
say you one, so say you all.
Thank you,
Thank
Jesus.
God for smartphones and thank God for Steve Jobs creating the iPhone.
Says red reflective
Thank
vote.
you, Jesus. Yes.
Oh man.
On behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service.
Steve
but
Jobs
heavy
was
duty
smiling,
jury
folks.
service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So, all rise for the jury.
Woo. Man.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week.
The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings. 1 week after that, we'll order a PSI immediately, returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now, we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
Move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff.
Oh,
Anything
shit.
further? All right. Thank you.
And he presented himself for arrest. And there you are.
I think he was expecting that though. I
Yeah.
really do.
So there you have it, less than 10 minutes. Guilty on all 3 counts. Guilty second-degree murder, guilty third-degree murder, guilty second-degree manslaughter.
Thank you,
saw the
Jesus,
former
thank you,
police
Jesus.
officer there, Derek Chauvin, handcuffed. He's going back into jail. He was out of jail on bail, awaiting these verdicts. Guilty on all 3 counts. Let's get immediate reaction from Don Lemon. Don, you're watching this as closely as anyone.
Justice has been served.
Yep.
And you can see the reaction from the crowd. How
About time.
And I'm sure people who are watching all over this country, watching all over the world, are on their devices getting messages from people, as I am, saying, thank you, Jesus. Thank God. Finally, justice on all counts. The attorney for the Crump family has reached out and given me a statement, Wolf, and he says, guilty. Painfully earned justice has finally arrived for George Floyd's family. This verdict is a turning point in history and sends a clear message on the need for accountability of law enforcement. Justice for Black America is justice for all America. We thank Minnesota AG Keith Ellison and his team, along with our legal team, for fierce dedication to justice for George. But it does not end here. We still have work to do. We have to make the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act become law so we can hold law enforcement accountable and prevent so many of these unjustified killings of marginalized people of color. This reminds me in so many ways, and it's not specific, but it reminds me of the tension and the passion and the angst that was felt during the reading of O.J. Simpson. People on the street hugging each other. Other people were just besides themselves. But remanded into custody.
But you know what, Ma? I disagree with him on that because
and if that didn't speak for itself,
I don't think a lot of people
a police officer
wanted to see him go free.
been on the
I think
job for years, a
OJ was different. People were split. There were a lot of people split about this guy because of the video.
The office I worked in when O.J. Simpson was
You know, Don, this is a powerful moment in American history that we're watching unfold right now. Anderson, guilty on all 3 counts, second-degree murder, potentially up to 40 years.
I
We don't know if
thought,
we'll get
and
that.
then when he was
Third-degree
found
murder,
guilty,
25
there was people
years,
running out of the
maximum
office
sentence, second-degree
crying.
manslaughter,
They were
guilty, maximum
really,
sentence,
really
10 years.
upset.
Oh, hold on a second. I think these are
All that, but
consecutive.
He's going to jail right now for potentially a very long time.
Yeah, these are consecutive. Somebody asked if they
On
were.
the left-hand side of your screen, in the lower corner, what you're seeing is that is the location where George Floyd was murdered. That is where Derek Chauvin killed, murdered George Floyd. On the right-hand side of your
Those are
screen,
consecutive. Somebody asked
courthose where we
if
were
they were
seeing,
consecutive.
George
Those are
Floyd's,
consecutive,
girlfriend,
folks.
Van Jones, your
They
response
are.
to your reaction
Oh, here's
to this
Van. Someone is
one
Van gonna
down,
cry?
many more to go.
Yeah.
But I think about that young girl who brought out her cell phone and who stood there in horror, not knowing what to do, but just holding that phone steady. She did the right thing.
Yep.
All those community members
Yep.
who came and begged and pleaded and talked, they did the right thing. That EMT person did the right thing. When people called the police on the police, they did the right thing. When the police chief fired this man, he did the right thing. When people marched by the millions, they did the right thing. And part of what I think the message has to be is that we have to get more involved. It started with that young girl. She got involved. And then you had a community stand up And you had a governor step in and take the case and give it to Keith Ellison to make sure that it was done the right way. This is the beginning of something. This is not the end of anything. This is the beginning of something. Where is Congress? They need to act. Those chokeholds are still legal according to the federal government. That needs to change. There's no duty to intervene from the federal government. That needs to change. There's no register for cops like Chauvin. That needs to change.
We don't have, we got a lot of old jokers. Politics is not ready. They need to get younger people in there.
This should never happen again.
Biden is okay, but he's so old he doesn't have any new ideas. And he certainly doesn't know what justice is.
Sometimes when we fight, we won. The people won.
When you saw Derek Chauvin putting his hands behind his back, being handcuffed and let out of the court, what did you think?
Justice. Justice. I've seen so many kids who've done so much less than him walk out of courtrooms in handcuffs with much less evidence. I've seen kids do 20 years, 30 years on snitch evidence. Just one kid testify against another kid and go away to prison. You don't have TV cameras and body cameras and cell phones. So many young people from that community sitting in prison. And cops getting away with murder over and over again. That's what justice looks like. When people break, all we want is the police to obey the law. We're not asking for anything but that. For the police to obey the law. And when they break the law, they should have handcuffs just like anybody else. We don't want them to be below us or beneath us. They should obey the law. That is what justice looks like.
Do you worry some people are going to see this and say, okay, that's good, it's done, it's over?
It took too long. It took too long. It took too much marching. It took too much. It took too many tears. And it was too close. And I don't care who you are. This morning you woke up afraid to hope. You were scared to hope.
Look what I said. It's taking too long. We don't know what it's going to be. You lost your faith. If they treat you so bad, you lost your faith.
Prosecution's closing. They bore witness to what was happening. They felt powerless. They felt guilt. They felt remorse that they could not do more. And I remember that 18-year-old who had the wherewithal and the fortitude to hold America's eyes to what was going on and said, I spent nights being guilty, apologizing to George Floyd, and then I realized it's not what I should have done, it's what you should have done, talking to the officer who was standing there in that courtroom. And the idea here that here we are, going from a feeling of powerless to having it handed over to the jury, for them to now assign guilt to somebody who was not a part of the noble profession of police officers, that was acting under the color of law because he could. And how dare anyone question my ability to keep my knee on the neck of a man for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. This is a profound moment of justice, but it's also one, as Van talks about, I look ahead to what justice actually means in a definitive and holistic sense. This is but a start, but at least now I can answer my son's question when he says, Mommy, what
This
if
is
that
what the
happened
mayor
to
of
me?
Oakland, she
I can
writes,
show what justice look like today.
today's verdict
Sir,
is a
side
just
note,
one,
Sir, explain where you
and it
are,
is
what
also
you're
an
saying.
indictment. The deep structural racism that pervades our country and leads to the state-sponsored
Sir,
murder of
side
black
note.
men like George
She's
Floyd
getting
and too many
back in
others must
position.
end.
We'll go back.
Juries shouldn't have to
Let's
tell
go back
us
to,
this.
We'll go back to her very
Yep,
shortly.
Libby's right about that.
Laura, just in
So,
general,
yep.
what
So that
happens
was
now?
Oakland Mayor Libby
is
Schaaf
several weeks
about
away.
It is, and
5
first what happens, as they said,
minutes
what
ago
happens
on
is
Twitter.
blatant factors, the idea of those
Wonder if she
aggravating
watched
factors.
my
That
live
means
stream,
is
so there.
the judge will now decide whether
Yeah.
the idea that
There
happening
it
in
is.
front
Just
of a
retweeted
child
you, Libby.
that was
There you
young as
go.
9 years old, the idea of
Um,
George Floyd being particularly
so,
vulnerable in the position, the idea of the power dynamic
let's see
of
who
an
else
officer
is,
to a civilian, the judge will now
the 50th
assess
mayor
those
of Oakland,
aggravating
as you can
factors.
see there.
You also have the notion of what's called the PSI.
And
These are the pre-sentencing report, essentially.
let's
And
see if
what that
London
to
Breed has
show
chimed in.
different,
She's
they
the
call
mayor
crimogenic factors
of
that say what's his
San
remorse,
Francisco.
what's his criminal history, if any. I
Um,
suspect there's none. He's a police officer,
and
and was after all. And the
that's her
idea is
pinned
about
tweet.
what would a holistic rehabilitation
She
plan
hasn't
look like.
yet
Remember, he's not serving life in
chimed
prison on
in.
any of these charges, so he will one day return to society.
So-
what will that look like when he does?
You know, Vin, the Lord Coates talked about
Let's see
bearing
here.
witness, and you talked about it as well. The young
She
woman
hasn't
who
yet
held
chimed in.
a video, a camera.
She hasn't announced about the main
and-
library. That
and
was 3
all of
hours
us
ago.
carry those
So,
cameras with us, but
at some point,
it
let's
really
get back to
reminds
this.
so many people. It reminds us all that we can bear witness in our own
You
lives.
shouldn't get that in
I'm
your
not talking about
headlines.
videotaping things.
Wait,
I'm talking about
wait.
bearing witness to the struggles of others, bearing witness to the
This is
pain,
already
to the
on it.
injustices that we see.
Yeah, and that was one of the most beautiful things that happened. If you in January, February 2020, if you'd asked probably the average white person, is police brutality a big deal? Is anti-racism a big deal? Then someone would have said yes, someone would have said no. Because of that young woman, and because of the video, 20 million white Americans.
For those of you who might be wondering, folks, this is when I go live. This is automatically posted on Oakland News Now. There, as you can see. So as well.
That gives you a sense.
So all we have to do is click on it here.
And so that shouldn't just happen in the streets when we're marching. There's so many opportunities, to your point, for us to do better.
There's and here it is. So if I click on this, what we get is what you're watching. See that? Pretty cool, huh?
Close a little bit, because
the most advanced news system
the police chief fired the guy and testified against him. There were people throughout the profession of law enforcement who came forward and did the right thing for once. And guess what? All those people still have jobs, and Chauvin is in jail. So more cops can speak up.
Yep.
More police chiefs can speak up, and more people can do the right thing in these situations.
Chief, we want to go to Don Lemon. Don?
Anderson, thanks. And Van, you're absolutely right, and so is Laura. Laura, we spoke earlier today, and we talked about the people who were standing there on the side of the street and filming this. And yes, they did feel helpless in the moment, but they didn't know their power then, but they certainly know their power now. But I just want to add to, when Van said that there's a lot more to be done. What there needs to be done, police officers around the country are going to have to do things. They're going to have to hold their fellow officers accountable. There are other officers who are involved in this particular incident. And in that moment, it doesn't seem that they held their fellow officers accountable. And with the Army lieutenant in Virginia, no one held that officer accountable as he was spraying the other officer and treating him in a way that was just demoralizing and disrespectful. So it's incumbent upon the citizens to hold these police officers accountable, but it's going to be incumbent upon the organization and the fellow officers who are there every day with those officers who are not doing the right thing to hold them accountable. When you get to the streets now, go ahead.
No, I just want to bring in, you're talking about officers, I just want to bring in
folks, I got to show you one of the major tweets here on Twitter.
When you see what's happening.
One of the trend says, rot in hell. Hey, Mom, it says, rot in hell. That's the tweet. Mom.
Trial, it's a pro-police trial.
On Twitter, the trend is rot in hell. That's what wow, that's... And, that is...
It doesn't harm.
I hate to say this as
for more than 50 years.
As a Christian, but what he did was
a dark side. That's the side.
What he did was the devil in action. I mean, just pure.
That's where they operate.
No other way to describe it. It was the devil in action. This was Lord's Day. Okay? This was the Lord's Day. That's how I look at it. We have had way too much evil in the past several years. This is the beginning of the end of that.
Quiet down a little bit, then it comes back with something else. You can't afford to do that. I think the president's making a mistake by not taking the lead on police reform and saying, well, our Congress can't do much of anything right now. And so, there needs to really be the leadership there. This is the moment. The moment is now. I'm proud that I spent 50 years in policing. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. But I also can't be blind to the fact that we've got people who have no business wearing a badge and a gun. And
John Marks agrees. He says it was, and the Lord has its day today, his day today. Yep. This is the Lord's day. This is the Lord's day.
We don't. Some departments do, many don't. We don't teach people how to deal with power and authority. Can you imagine hiring some 21-year-old, give him a badge and a gun in a souped-up car with lights and sirens, and then wonder why you have problems?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have to really look at our profession differently. And bring the people in that can handle it in so many different ways. And so this is the moment. And there's a lot that can be done. I'm optimistic. I really am.
Chief, do you think that it makes a difference to have the police chief there and other officers testifying against a fellow officer in a trial that is this big, that has so much attention? You said a springboard. I think it's an inflection point, possibly.
Well, the other officers is really more important than the police chief testifying. Because the average cop expects the police chief to be able to testify.
In terms of what other Oaklanders, I got a press release from Rebecca Kaplan asking for an end to gun violence, which I think should be. She put that out there. She put that out there before the verdict.
That's culture change.
But she should have put something out there calling for an end to police violence.
But it can happen. And it starts with holding people accountable that operate outside of the bounds of justice.
Yeah. And you're right on.
Brian says, I went back and watched your live reaction. That laugh when all three were announced guilty. It wasn't.
Where Omar is, and this is where this event.
Yeah, it was. It was spontaneous. I'll own that because.
What are you seeing there?
It wasn't. I'll actually replay it for you. I said.
Right now, we had people literally
I said, guilty. It wasn't a laughter of humor. It was a laughter of relief because this is ridiculous, okay? The man was killed and we witnessed a murder on device invented by Steve Jobs, who left us in 2005, that I'm using right now. And I built my company around, okay? So, yeah. This is a day for...
And read that verdict. I mean, this is happening literal steps.
Yeah, it's beyond. Yeah, Brian, it's beyond ridiculous. Absolutely.
And right now,
look at that.
Everywhere you turn, more people are coming into this crowd, and they are getting more and more excited. And one of those people who was very emotional when the verdict was read, I want you to introduce yourself, but also just tell me why you were so emotional once you learned that the verdict was read.
My feeling was it's very bittersweet because his family, much like a good friend of mine, Sandra Bland, Sandy as I knew her, will never see him again, will never touch him, will never hug him. His daughter will grow up without a father. They'll never see him again, and he's still 6 feet under. So justice, in my opinion, will never be served. But it is very bittersweet. It's at least something. We're getting somewhere in this country.
Yep,
we're
big
seeing
time.
some progress.
Yep.
And I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said you were a friend of Sandra Bland. That's a reminder.
I have to say that locally,
this is about
the Oakland Superintendent of Schools has sent out.
Beyond his name goes to
Kyla
other names like Tamir
Johnson has sent out a message. She says, "I hear your frustration, pain, and anger about
bringing that context ahead of this verdict.
Our criminal justice system." It's right here, and she says, "And I feel it too." I'm not going to take time to read the whole thing to you, but some of the reactions
We have a big race problem.
that I'm getting out
here. We have a policing problem. We need police reform immediately. This state has a bad problem with police. We're in a militarized zone. Right now, there are trucks everywhere, all over the city. And we're a peaceful city. Everyone has been peacefully protesting, and we're being attacked by law enforcement here.
Well, let me ask you, now that the verdict has been read, and you got guilty on all charges, where do we go from here? Where do we go?
It's hard to say because the problem is we have a white supremacy problem in this country, and it was written into the Constitution. And until that Constitution is changed, it's hard to say where we're headed. It's hard to feel like there's going to be justice in this country ever for people of color. We're standing on stolen land right now. So it just feels like,
Ray's SP says, "Why don't we get rid of the police then?" Ray's, I don't think we need to get rid of the police. We need to get rid of bad cops. I'll just say, I think it's not a matter of getting rid of the police, but getting rid of bad cops. And having kind of a watchdog that's, smartphone powered to really put on camera, not just the body cam, but others quite literally using their smartphones to capture these things. That's how we get change here, okay? Look at what happened. So this is a new day.
In many regards, were hashtag after hashtag after hashtag in case after case after case. And I was talking to one activist earlier who said that in Minnesota, they know how to organize, they know how to push back, and if you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, eventually they will push back. And they feel that the verdict today, in large part, was because of the boots on the ground, the pressure that was put on public officials to make sure that this case was prosecuted the right way. And to see all of that followed through has been an incredibly emotional experience for so many. And I want to bring in the comments of one more person really quickly, because in the moment, right after the verdict was read, he was incredibly emotional. BJ, I was standing right next to you when the verdict was read, and you completely broke down as you put your fist up in the air. What was going through your mind in that moment?
Basically just that this is something different. This is new. I was just because we've been here so many times before, and honestly, the first thing that I really thought about was the Rodney King situation, and I thought it could have been something similar to that, just because we all saw that too. And this feels like we can breathe. This feels like something new. It's hopefully a new day in America.
BJ, I appreciate you. All right, be safe out here. I want to send it back to you, Wolf. Now, obviously, a scene of celebration here at George Floyd Square, the epicenter of what happened almost a year ago today.
Omar, thank you very much. We're going to get back to you. Just to recap for viewers who may just be tuning in, the former police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter. He was handcuffed as he was escorted out of that courtroom. There you see it right there just moments ago. Derek Chauvin, he was out on bail awaiting this verdict. Now he's going to jail, and he'll be in jail for a long time. We're waiting for President Biden, by the way. We're told he's going to make a statement to the American people momentarily from the White House, reacting to the guilty verdicts. Let's go to Miguel Marquez right now. He's over there at the scene of this murder. Omar, tell us what you're seeing there over there at Cup Foods. I mean, Miguel.
Yes, sir. This is Miguel Marquez, and I am at the Hennepin County Government Center where the verdict came down today. And as it was read out, this crowd erupted in what can only be described as elation after verdict was read. I spoke to one man right in the moment, and he was in tears. This is a guy I'm 6 foot. He was about 6'3", 6'4". He was absolutely in tears. People holding on to each other. You can see right now it's gone from the grounds of the courthouse to the street, and it's essentially a street party in downtown Minneapolis right now. And I don't know if, Jerry, you can hit the building all the way from here, but you can see the Hennepin County Government Center. You can see the National Guard members along that part of it above the steps there, watching out over this crowd. And the crowd is now growing. If we look down the street on the other side of the Government Center here, the crowd is growing exponentially. There's barbecues going. There's people on top of their cars. You even have somebody who's come out to do sign language for those who might need that service. This rig, by the way, the band you're looking at with the speakers, that has been at Brooklyn Center almost every night. This is a rig that we've seen around town. This is something that whenever this particular band with the speakers show up, you know that's sort of where people are gathering. We're also listening to, I believe that's Courtney Ross, who was George Floyd's girlfriend, who responded to us a short time ago about her feelings about this verdict coming down, and she could barely speak. She was completely overwhelmed with emotion. She expected guilty verdicts on all 3, but to hear it is something different. There is a real sense that this means not just something for Minneapolis, not just something for Minnesota, but for the country, for race relations, for policing. That this may not be the biggest step forward, but it is certainly a step forward for people here in Minneapolis. Wolf?
It certainly is, Miguel. Thank you very much. I want to show our viewers here in the United States and around the world the reaction of some of the crowd as they heard about the verdicts. Listen to this.
all charges.
This is Oakland Councilmember Treva Reed. Amen. Justice rain down. My heart is heavy, and emotions are full processing this guilty verdict. That is Oakland District 7 Councilmember Treva Reed, 18 minutes ago on Facebook. Her reaction to the verdict. Right there.
A celebration as they heard the guilty verdicts for the former police officer Derek Chauvin. They heard the Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill making the announcement in that courtroom. Sarah Seidner has been watching all of this from day one. Sarah, you're there on the scene for us. Give us a sense of what you're seeing right now.
The phone, hey, Morgan, the phone call is not connecting.
Unfortunately, Sarah Seidner, we're going to have to reconnect with Sarah Seidner. Don Lemon, we're watching all of this together with you, with Anderson, all of our reporters who were there. So many people are watching.
The brother of George Floyd. He was in the court when the verdict was read. He called me and there were nothing but tears. He could basically hardly get the words out. He said that this gave him both relief and release, hearing a guilty verdict on all 3 counts: second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. He was emotional. He could barely speak, but he wanted people to know that he thanked them for the support that they have been given throughout this entire process. We are trying to connect with him again now as he is, coming out of the court. And we know that we will hear from the family. We know that we will hear from them in not too much time from now. We are expecting to hear from them very, very shortly. But we did hear from him. He called me from court once he was out.
Leon
and
writes on
the scene of people,
Facebook, guilty.
Is here. Everybody
Ray
is out
worked with me at the city of Oakland. He worked for
there
Larry
are
Reed. Guilty.
celebrations, there are a lot
All
of
3
tears.
counts.
There is a lot of feeling going on right now, Wolf.
There certainly is, and we're going to watch it all unfold. We expect, once again, momentarily, the President of the United States, President Biden, will be making a statement. He'll be speaking to the American people on the guilty verdicts. We're also expecting to hear from state and other officials in Minnesota. They'll be reacting, but in the meantime, on the streets of Minneapolis, where Sarah is, where Miguel is, where Omar is, there's a celebration going on right now. Don Lemon, it shouldn't be a surprise that so
And
many
Shauna
people,
Scott,
not
another
only
friend,
in
says,
Minneapolis,
I
but
hear
around
guilty
the country and probably around the world
is verdict.
are
Please
relieved right
confirm.
Yeah.
She writes, my heart still hurts that this man was killed in the streets like this by law enforcement, quote unquote, and we witnessed it. Lives forever changed. Rest in power. George Floyd, say his name. Yep.
In Washington, D.C. As we wait for this president to come out and make a statement now, the former president was preparing to do
Hold on a moment, Don. Keith Ellison,
yes, sir.
the Attorney
Yes, sir.
General of Minnesota, together with other prosecutors, is about to speak. I want to hear what he has to say. He was in overall charge of this prosecution. Yeah, I guess they're going to begin. They're going to begin in a few seconds.
Get Jerry up there.
This is Keith Ellison.
He's the only black dude there. Get Jerry up there. He's a star.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith Ellison. I'm the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. And since the investigation and prosecution of this case began last May, everyone involved has pursued one goal: justice. We pursued justice wherever it led. When I became the lead prosecutor for the case, I asked for time and patience to review the facts, gather evidence, and prosecute for the murder of George Floyd to the fullest extent the law allowed. I want to thank the community for giving us that time and allowing us to do our work. That long, hard, painstaking work has culminated today. I would not call today's verdict justice, however, because justice implies true restoration. But it is accountability, which is the first step towards justice. And now the cause of justice is in your hands. And when I say your hands, I mean the hands of the people of the United States. George Floyd mattered. He was loved by his family and his friends. His death shocked the conscience of our community, our country, the whole world. He was loved by his family and friends. But that isn't why he mattered. He mattered because he was a human being. And there is no way we can turn away from that reality. The people who stopped and raised their voices on May 25th, 2020, were a bouquet of humanity. A phrase I stole from my friend Jerry Blackwell.
There you
A
go.
bouquet of humanity. Old, young, men and women, black and white. A man from the neighborhood just walking to get a drink. A child going to buy a snack with her cousin. An off-duty firefighter on her way to a community garden. Brave young women, teenagers, who press record on their cell phones. Why did they stop? They didn't know George Floyd. They didn't know he had a beautiful family. They didn't know he had been a great athlete. And they didn't know he was a proud father or that he had people in his life who loved him. They stopped and raised their voices, and they even challenged authority because they saw his humanity. They stopped and they raised their voices because they knew that what they were seeing was wrong. They didn't need to be medical professionals or experts in the use of force. They knew it was wrong. And they were right. These community members, this bouquet of humanity, did it again in this trial. They performed simple yet profound acts of courage. They told the truth, and they told the whole world the truth about what they saw. They were vindicated by the chief of police, by Minneapolis' longest serving police officer, and by many other police officers who stepped up and testified as to what they saw and to what they knew. What happened on that street was wrong. We owe it, and we owe our gratitude to fulfilling we owe them our gratitude for fulfilling their civic duty and for their courage in telling the truth. To countless people in Minnesota and across the United States who joined them in peacefully demanding justice for George Floyd, we say, all of us, thank you. Mm-hmm. In the coming days, more may seek to express themselves again through petition and demonstration. I urge everyone to honor the legacy of George Floyd by doing so calmly, legally,
like that lady
and
wouldn't have
peacefully.
shot that boy.
I urge everyone
If he
to
hadn't been
continue
black, she
the
wouldn't
journey
have even
to
thought about
transformation
pulling her gun
and
out.
justice.
Nope.
It's
She
in your
wouldn't.
hands
No.
now.
So
She did
I
it
also
on
want to
reflex.
address the Floyd family
Yeah.
Didn't even
by
think
name.
about it.
right,
Over the
he's
last year,
black,
the
black.
family
He's
Yeah.
of
killing.
Floyd
We're talking
had
about
to relive
Dante right
again
now.
and again
Yeah.
the worst day of
That's
their
coming.
lives when they lost their brother,
Be
their
scared
father,
shitless too.
their friend. I'm profoundly grateful to them for giving us the time we needed to prosecute this case.
And so they didn't waste
They have
time in
shown
putting
the
her in
world
jail.
what grace and class and courage really look like. Although a verdict alone cannot end their pain, I hope it's another step on the long path toward healing for them. There's no replacing your beloved Perry or Floyd, as his friends
Look at the
call
new
him,
cases.
but
Of
he
course.
is the one who sparked a worldwide movement, and that's important. We owe our thanks to the men and women of the jury who gave many hours of their time and attention to carefully listening to the evidence, weighing the facts, rendering a verdict. They are regular people from all walks of life, a lot like that bouquet of humanity on that corner on May 25th and in that courtroom. They answered the call, and they served in a landmark trial. They now deserve to return to their lives. If they ask you to respect their privacy, we ask you to honor that request. I want to acknowledge the remarkable team that helped us prosecute the case. We put everything we had into this prosecution. We presented the best case that we could, and the jury heard us, and we're grateful for that.
Yep.
We had the sole burden of proof in the case, and history shows that winning cases like these can be difficult. I'm proud of every hour, every minute, and every ounce of effort we put in this case. And let me tell you, we spent many hours working on this case, did we not? We, week after week, committee meeting after committee meeting, this team never let up and it never quit. We fought every day and we did it together. The Attorney General's office together with the Hennepin County Attorney's office. Thank you, sir. And we did it together. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who worked on the case. Most of these folks will tell you it's a bad idea to put together a team of all Michael Jordans. Not basketball. This team, that was their true strength, is sharing the load, passing the ball, understanding that all of us together are smarter than any one of us alone.
Exactly.
And that worked. Although the verdict has been rendered, this is not the end. In the coming weeks, the court will determine sentencing, and later this summer, we expect to present another case. We will not be talking about that. This verdict reminds us how hard it is to make enduring change. And I just want to finish by sharing some important historical legacy, if you allow me. In 1968, the Kerner Commission was formed to investigate the causes of uprisings across major American cities. And a man named Dr. Kenneth Clark, a famous African-American psychologist, who, along with his equally accomplished psychologist wife, Mamie, contributed to compelling research in the Brown versus Board of Education case. And Dr. Clark testified at the Kerner Commission. And I want to quote you what he said. I read that report, the one in the 1919 riot in Chicago, and it was as if I were reading the report of investigating the committee of the Harlem riot in 1935, the report on investigating the Harlem riot in 1943, and the report of the McCone Commission on the Watts riot. I must say again in candor to you, the members of this commission, it's like a kind of an Alice in Wonderland with the same moving picture reshown over and over again, the same analysis, the same recommendation, and the same inaction. Those are the words of Dr. Clark in 1968. Here we are in 2021. Here we are in 2021, still addressing the same problem.
Yep.
Since Dr. Clark testified, we have seen Rodney King, Abner Louima, Oscar Grant, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Laquan McDonald, Stephon Clark, Atiana Jefferson, Anton Black, Breonna Taylor, and now Dante, Wright, and Adam Toledo. This has to end. We need true justice. That's not one case. That is a social transformation that says that nobody's beneath the law and no one is above it. This verdict reminds us that we must make enduring, systemic, societal change. More than a month ago, months before George Floyd was murdered, the Minnesota Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington and I released the recommendations of our working group on reducing deadly force encounters with law enforcement. What all of us in that working group, including law enforcement, wanted is for everyone to go home safe. Anytime someone doesn't, everyone's lives are changed forever.
Yep.
We need to use this verdict as an inflection point. What if we just prevented the problem instead of having to try these cases? We don't want any more community members dying at the hands of law enforcement and their families' lives ruined. We don't want any more law enforcement members having to face criminal charges and their families' lives ruined.
I think it's always happened, Ma, and it's just that it took smartphones and technology to pick it up.
Where we as a society re-examine the use
What
of
changed
force
is how much we
and
know
our
about society.
old subtle assumptions.
If we had smartphones 40 years ago, I think a lot would have
Chief
changed
Arredondo
faster.
and the Minneapolis police officers who by their testimony said enough is enough. And another way to prevent it is by acknowledging and lifting up everyone's humanity, helping communities heal, and officers be well. Another way to prevent it is with accountability. Passing laws and instituting policies and training is
Getting
important,
the right people
but
in
they
politics
must be
make a
more
big
than words on
difference.
paper,
Mm-hmm.
and there must be
Politics has become
accountability
power. They
for
don't worry. They
violating
wouldn't
them.
worry about
With this
society.
verdict,
Nope.
we have brought some
a great
accountability. Finally, this verdict demands us to never give up the hope that we can make enduring change. Generations of people said slavery would never end. Generations said Jim Crow would never end. Generations said women would never be equal to men. Generations said if you were different in any way, you could never be a full and equal member of our society. Today, we have to end this travesty of recurring, enduring deaths at the hands of law enforcement. Those beliefs are things we have to focus our attention on. And as I now do close, I just want to say to you, the work of our generation is to put unaccountable law enforcement behind us. It's time to transform the relationship between community and the people who are sworn to protect them from one that is mistrustful, suspicious, and in some cases terrifying, into one that is empathetic, compassionate, and affirming. That will benefit everyone, including police officers who deserve to serve in a profession that is honored, in departments where they don't have to worry about colleagues who don't follow the rules. Now that work is in your hands. The work of our generation is to put an end to the vestiges of Jim Crow and the centuries of trauma, and finally put an end to racism. We can end it. It doesn't have to be with us into the future if we decide now to have true liberty and justice for all. The work of our generation is to say goodbye to old practices that don't serve us anymore and to put them all behind us. One conviction, even one like this one can create a powerful new opening to shed old practices and reset relationships. So with that, I just want to say that I do hope that people step forward and understand that nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. You can do something the way like everyday people like Donald Williams and Genevieve Hanson and Christopher Martin and Charles McMillan and all those teenagers and young people stepped up and did something. You can do things like help pass the George Floyd Justice and Accountability Act. It's in your hands. Let's get the work done. And now I'd like to invite my friend and partner in justice, Michael Freeman, Hennepin County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. First, I want once again to extend my heartfelt sympathies to the families of George Floyd. I hope today's verdict provides some measure of closure for them. Now let me say what a tremendous job Attorney General Keith Ellison did in recruiting and organizing a talented team of prosecutors and supporting staff. Great job.
Hear, hear.
Matt Frank, Jerry Blackwell, Steve Sutton, and Aaron Eldridge were exceptional. Their use of experts, evidence, and witnesses left the jury no alternative but to find Mr. Chauvin guilty. We and the people of Minnesota should rightly be proud of these four and your entire staff of volunteers and assistant attorney generals and the jobs they did over the last 7 weeks.
He's the smartest one I've ever seen.
I'm also proud from the moment that the Hennepin County Attorney's Office charged Derek Chauvin with murder and manslaughter 4 days after George Floyd's murder, our team worked long hours side by side with the Attorney General's team. Managing Attorney Gene Burdorf did legal analysis and writing. Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Joshua Larson did witness prep and strategy development. And Vernona Boswell, manager of our Victim Services Division, has been in direct contact for nearly a year now with the family of George Floyd. Victim and witness advocates Jessica Emmerman and Keith Johnson managed all the witnesses, civilian and professional. My two deputies, Lolita Ioa and Andy Lefevre, and I supplied strategic advice and coordination to this talented team 24/7. These guilty verdicts against Mr. Chauvin cannot be the end of the conversation about officer killings of civilians. We need to prevent these killings in the first place. The Minnesota legislature as it moves into the final 3 weeks of the session, must pass a number of bills that will make policing fairer and safer for all, but especially for black men and women and other people of color. I've been lobbying legislators to pass these critical bills. If they fail, then it will be time once again to have a statewide task force to hold hearings and come up with model legislation intending to put an end to these deaths. I am prepared to be part of that fight. Again, Keith, great job.
Thank you, Mike. And now I'd like to ask the trial lawyers to share some thoughts if they have any. But before I do that, I'd like to myself thank a number of people. And I'm just going to start by, why don't we just have our trial lawyers come forward, and then we'll thank our whole team. So, Jerry, Steve, which one of y'all want to do it?
Jerry.
Thank you, Attorney General Ellison. And when I say thank you to Attorney General Ellison, I want to thank you for calling me and calling me back into public service, which is something that I was able to do as a federal prosecutor, as a state prosecutor, as an assistant county attorney in the United States Army. When I left private practice, I thought those days were behind me, but I received a call, and it was from Keith Ellison. And he gave me the opportunity to step back into public service, something that is so important to me, something that I cherish. And I would just encourage anyone, if you get a call like that as an attorney, it's a privileged life, it's a noble profession. And if somebody calls you and they ask you for help, don't overthink it. Just do it.
Mm-hmm.
As I've found in my career, you get a lot more than you give. I'm honored to have stood with the Floyd family, to stood with the state of Minnesota as we go through this painful process together. And it's been my privilege to practice with this incredible, gifted trial team. And so I stand here today in gratitude. I'm thankful. I want to thank the jury for their service, for doing what was right and decent and correct and speaking the truth and finding the right verdict in this case.
You know his net worth when he died was $1 million.
George Floyd?
I'm Jerry Blackwell.
That's good.
My comments are going to
There's
be
Jerry.
fairly brief. I want to first say thank you to all of these selfless servants that you see standing here and the many more that you do not see, who had the willingness, the courage, the passion, the intentional fortitude to get into good trouble. They stepped into the light and they shine. And for that I say thank you. I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I've had to serve. Now, no verdict can bring George Perry Floyd back to us. But this verdict does give a message to his family that he wants somebody, that his life mattered.
Yep.
That all of our lives matter.
Yep.
And that's important. And I also hope that this verdict, for all of the rest of the collective, all of us, will help us further along the road toward a better humanity. Thank you all.
Matt Frank?
Well, I can't really follow that too much, but I just want to say that it's been really a privilege to work with this awesome group of dedicated, hardworking people in this endeavor. But it's also been just a total privilege to get to know the Floyd family and to spend time with them and get to know them. Because first and foremost, this is for you, George Floyd, and for your family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me also thank very publicly.
I believe they stopped that. They're probably waiting for Vice President.
All right, unfortunately, we just lost that connection,
Biden,
but we actually we've just reconnected.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah.
Balmacum. Thank you, Zuri. And Natasha Robinson. I want to thank you and the next generation. The next generation
He's
of justice
expecting.
seekers. Dion Dodd, I want to thank you. Dion, where are you? Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Vernona Boswell. You are a star. And I also want to thank so many other people But with that, we're going to close our comments right now and just say that we're prepared to continue to pursue justice. Thank you.
Wow, that's a heck of a story, folks. That's.
All right, so there you have
I
the
think
Attorney General of the Attorney General
Raider said
and the other
he wrote,
prosecutors.
"No one's going to want to be a cop right now," and yeah, I want to push back on that. I don't think everybody should be a cop, and I think to a degree that's how we got into this problem. Because wait for the president, but I remember driving along 880, and the Oakland Police had, this was back in 2004 if memory serves, the Oakland Police put up this gigantic banner that with a hotline to hire someone. And I remember thinking, they're just going to get any crazy off the street. And this has come at a time when, I'm going to be very blunt, in the past, particularly someone white and male could get a great job feeding a family of four with just a high school education in a Ford plant or some equivalent. But here's President Obama's statement. Hold a second.
And we stand with all those who are committed to guaranteeing every American the full measure of justice that George and so many others have been denied. That statement from the former President of the United States, Barack Obama. Ben Crump, the lead attorney for the Floyd.
So at any rate, I remember saying that they were going to, they're going to basically, they're going to basically, hold on a second, I'm just going to freeze this for 1 second, folks. Then we'll get that. I just want to say this real quick. We wound up hiring everybody in Oakland. And what we got, among others, we got the Sorella Squap sex scandal. We had a number of officer-involved shootings. And policing has not improved. We had one man who's experienced all this for 22 years and waited to put his imprimatur on it. Thank God that Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf finally decided, after listening to me for almost 2 years, to bring in Lerone Armstrong as our chief of police in Oakland. Okay? Not everybody should be a cop. Raiders, and that's not the way. A special person should be a police officer who understands how to control their emotions, male or female, it shouldn't matter, who's strong enough, not just physically, but emotionally to do the job. Not everybody should be a cop, and I hope this verdict sends that message among others. You have to be a special person to be a police officer, and that's the way it should be. All right. Mom, you got thoughts about that? Okay. Here's
Hello. Hey, how you doing?
Gianna doing?
Feeling better now. Nothing is going to make it all better, but at least God, now there's some justice. Right. And you know, I think John is coming. My dad is going to change the world. He's going to start to change it now.
That's right.
Yes.
Amen. Start to change it now. So, you've been incredible. You're an incredible thing. I wish I were there just with my arms around you. I'm standing here with Cedric. We've been talking, we've been watching every second of this, and the Vice President, all of us, and we're all so relieved. Not just the one verdict, but all three, purely on all three counts. And it's really important. I'm anxious to see you guys. I really am. And we're going to get a lot more done. We're going to get police. We're going to do a lot. We're going to stay at it till we get it done.
Hopefully this is the momentum for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to get passed and have you sign.
That and a lot more. Not just that, but a lot more.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Let's give it a first shot at dealing with genuine systemic racism. Look, there's two people here that feel strongly as I do. The Vice President, she wants to say something.
Okay.
I'm just so proud of the entire family. Your courage, your strength, because there's strength for something. And this is a day of justice in America. And your family and you're going to show real leaders at this moment where we needed you. And in George's name and memory, we are going to make sure his legacy is intact. And that history will look back at this moment and know that it was an inflection moment. You had to sacrifice so much, your family did too. But we really do believe that with your leadership and the president that we have in the White House, that we're going to make something good come out of this tragedy, okay?
Thank you. And you guys all get ready, because when we do it, we're going to put you on Air Force One and get you.
We're going to hold you to that, President Biden.
Jesus, guarantee it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
She's okay. I'm going to tell her in a few.
My wife deals with me too.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, have a good ending, and have a positive ending. So good.
Nothing is worth it, but it's like I said, I keep thinking her words. Daddy's gonna change the world.
Yeah, change the world. Thank God.
Well, you got a shot to make it change the world.
That's right.
Yeah, big change.
You tell her what I said. Remind her.
You know what car really loses its value quick is that Mercedes.
Sorry?
She's coming to see you, Mr.
I was
President.
looking at the price of a 2017 Mercedes.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, so there you have it. These are live pictures now coming in from Ben Crump and the other representatives of the Floyd family. You see him there. We
Jesse
just heard
Jackson.
from the president, the vice president, and the first lady. They called Ben Crump to express their relief and their pleasure at these guilty verdicts. Let's listen in.
And Reverend Al Sharp. There you go. Well, folks.
Before we say anything, we're going to have a prayer. When we first came to Minneapolis and went to the site, when Ben Crump called, we remembered how Eric Garner said, "I can't breathe 11 times."
Yep.
His mother came with us to the site. The family came in, and this family has stood together for the last 11 months, watching this video go over and over and over again. This family stood with pain, suffering, and not knowing what the future held, because so many families went and got nothing. They thanked God when they got the indictment, which would not have happened had not the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, took this case. And Keith Ellison fought and put together a team that made this possible. And this is the first time in the history of this state that a white police officer has been convicted, less known convicted, of a murder. This is the first time in a long array of fights that we've seen 3 counts, guilty in all 3. We don't find pleasure in this. We don't celebrate a man going to jail. We would have rather George be alive.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we celebrate that we, because young people, white and black, some castigated, many that are here tonight, marched and kept marching and kept going. Many of them looked down on, but they kept marching and wouldn't let this die. And this is an assurance to them that if we don't give up, that we can win some rounds. But the war and the fight is not over. Just 2 days from now, we're going to have to deal with the funeral of Dante Wright in this same county, the same area. We still have cases to fight, but this gives us the energy to fight on. And we are determined that we're going to fight until we make federal law the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act must be law. We want to thank all that were involved, especially the Attorney General and the Governor and others. We want to thank President Biden, who the first time he came out of his house during the campaign, he flew to Houston and met with the family and Attorney Crump and I. And he sat there, and I will never forget, he said to George's daughter that I heard you say your father is going to change the world. Well, we can now tell George's daughter she was right. Her father has begun the changing of the world for real.
Yep, that's right.
But before we do anything, we first want to pray and thank God, because somehow God made a way. He had mercy. We believe in a God that can even get through the cracks in the jury room and bring conscience and bring truth. And that jury, we want to thank them for letting God give them the strength wherever they are tonight. We want them to know we broke down in tears when we heard the verdict. We had to hold each other and hug in tears because too many nights we've cried. Many of us for decades spent nights in jail. But today we can wipe our tears away and fight on for another day. There's sunlight. We're going to keep going till we bring it for the Eric Gardners and the Breonna Taylors, whose boyfriend is here tonight. Kenny Walker, Sean Bell, so many that did not get this night. This night is for them. Let us pray. Let's lock arms and pray like we can, folks. Where? Come on, Brandon. Where's Malone? Yeah, come on. You and Rodney come up front. You know you're hiding now. Brother Chris, get next to the Attorney General there. Let's pray. Dear God, we thank you for giving us the strength to stand together. Sometimes we would question each other. Sometimes we say this is just going to be a waste of time. But somehow you touch us in the midnight hours and teach us to hold on. And that if we would be faithful over a few things, you'd give us the victory over many. We thank you because we know it was not any doing of ours, but your loving kindness and your tender mercy that made tonight possible. Bless those that worked, that made this prosecution something they couldn't deny. Bless those policemen that got on the stand and testified against another policeman. Bless the jury that listened to the evidence and didn't listen to those that may criticize them for doing this. Bless the prosecutor, Keith Ellison, and his staff that did their job, even though they didn't know what the outcome would be. Bless Ben Crump in a special way, that worked tirelessly, that jumped on planes and left his family to make sure that justice would rain down. Thank you for all of the civil and human rights leaders that stood up. And we thank you for the nameless grandmas and grandpas that would get on their knees and ask you to give us a victory this time. And Lord, as we give you the thanks and give you the praise, let George know that his name is going down in history. They may have put their knee on his neck, but he will now be a figure that we will take the knees off our necks now, and we give you the praise. Thank you, and God, we give you the glory. These blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Let me say that I want to bring on now a man who has symbolized the fight for justice. He didn't seek the role, but he rose to the occasion. America, for many years, didn't have someone to stand for us. The last 4 years, we didn't have an Attorney General's office that would even hear our cry. But we had been raised to believe that God always has a ram in the bush. And God has a way of taking the most humble of people and raising them as up. We had an Attorney General in Black America that has represented these cases with the acumen and skill of one that was raised in the South, but came to claim this nation in a new direction. I bring you the Attorney General for Black America, Ben Crump.
There you go.
Thank you, Reverend Al Sharpton, not only for your mentorship, not only for being a great civil rights leader, but for being a moral authority, especially making sure no matter what happened, that we always maintained the moral high ground, knowing that we were on the right side of history as we fought for justice for George Perry Floyd Jr. Say his name. I am a member of a great team of very talented attorneys. And I'm going to acknowledge here, we got the Omegas and the Kappas, Reverend Jackson, and the Alphas in it.
Those are black fraternities,
I
folks.
want to acknowledge these
by the way.
great group of lawyers and then the family members. 2 or 3 of the lawyers will address you. And then at that time, we will hear from the family members before we take any of your questions. I want to acknowledge a great lawyer from Chicago, Illinois, one of the best I've ever had a chance to work with, Attorney Tony Romanucci. I want to recognize my partner on the front line in this case, one of the best lawyers at Ben Onum. He hails from Atlanta, Georgia, Attorney Chris Stewart. His law partner, Attorney Justin Miller, Attorney Madeline Simmons, a great Minnesota lawyers, Attorney Jeff Starnes, raise your hand, Jeff, Attorney Michelle Godot, and who else we got here? Anybody else? We have Attorney Scott Masterson, who's not present. Attorney Pavani. I said Michelle. We got Michelle. All right. It's just a great group of lawyers. And I want to let you know who we have present here with the family here in Minneapolis for this historic day.
Floyd took over.
We have George Floyd's brothers. We have Philonis Floyd. We have Rodney Floyd. We have Brandon Williams, who's George Floyd's nephew, but was more like a son to him. They call him Woo back in the 3rd Ward. We have Keita Floyd, Philonis' wife. We have, where Terrence at? Terrence, New York, where you at? We got Terrence Floyd, his sisters who are not with us, but we should absolutely acknowledge Bridget Floyd, who hails from North Carolina, his sisters Latanya and Jaja, who hail from Houston, Texas. We have his cousins, Sharita McGee, Tidra McGee.
Hey folks, while he's reading it, real quick, I'm gonna give my friend Oakland Councilman Lauren Taylor's tweets here. He says that it's hard to read this. He says he can sleep better tonight. He says I will sleep better tonight. And he says we are progressing yet can't afford to be complacent. The real test of how far we are progressing when future guilty verdicts are rendered, especially in situations that are less extreme but no less inhumane, racist, or unconstitutional. Again, we are progressing, yet can't afford to be complacent. Then he writes, he's relieved that our criminal justice system finally got something right when it comes to police violence. At the same time, I'm not naive to the fact that this is just one verdict in one trial, and true society consistently renders just. That's Oakland Council Member District 6, Lauren Taylor.
And we
and the only African American male council member right now.
America, let's pause for a moment to proclaim this historical moment, not just for the legacy of George Floyd, but for the legacy of America. The legacy of trying to make America for all Americans. So that George Floyd's victory and America's quest for equal justice under the law will be intertwined. America, let's frame this moment as a moment where we finally are getting close to living up to our Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that amongst them are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Where America, that means all of us. That means black people. That means Hispanic people. That means Native people. That means Asian people. That means all of us, America. We frame this moment for all of us, not just for George Floyd. This is a victory for those who champion humanity over inhumanity. Those who champion justice over injustice. Those who champion morals over immorality. America, let's lean into this moment. And let's make sure, Reverend Al, that this moment will be documented for our children yet unborn as they continue on the journey to justice, knowing that the blood of George Floyd will give them a trail to find a way to a better America, a more just America, a more just America where Breonna Taylor gets an opportunity to sleep in peace at night without the police busting in her front door. A more just America where Ahmaud Arbery gets to run free and not be lynched for jogging while black. A more just America where Jacob Blake and Anthony McLean and Walter Scott and Laquan McDonald and all these other black men, Terrence Crutcher, who was shot in the back while running away like Dante Wright was just a week ago, because for some reason, black men running away from the police is more dangerous than young white men who commit mass murders and walk towards the police with an assault weapon. Reverend Bryant, like Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin. America, let this be the precedent. Let this be the precedent where we live up to the high ideals and the promises when we say liberty and justice for all. Those sun-kissed children are included in all. Those children who overcame slavery, the Middle Passage, the Dred Scott decision, Plessy v. Ferguson, Jim Crow, and his much smarter, wiser son, Jim Crow Jr. Esquire. Let this be the precedence where we overcome systematic racism and oppression, and that we are a better people, and we will leave our children a better world for us all. At this time, we will hear from a great lawyer, because nobody does this alone. It's always a team effort. And we have the lawyers, the preachers, the civil rights leaders, the education leaders, the activists. Let's give a big round of applause for the activists. Yeah, that's right. The people who stayed in the streets. Right. Yep. The people who came nationally, but more importantly, the people who were here locally, who were standing up for George Floyd on 38th and Chicago Avenue, day in and day out. Silky, the people who wouldn't go home, wouldn't stay quiet. Reverend Jackson, the people who followed your example. Donald Williams. Donald wanted to be here. Yeah. So, we love you, Donna. Without further ado, my brother, Attorney Chris Stewart. And Tony, you coming up?
Well, folks, I thought they were going to introduce Jesse Jackson. He's back there. Hope his health is well. He's been, let me freeze this for a second because this is going to go on for a while. But I want to thank everybody for coming in and watching this. And this is a new day in America. And it's an example also of American judicial democracy at work. It reminds me of how beautiful this country is and how much and how important it is to maintain it. And to also, when I say have faith in the system, which means make it work. Don't sit back and just pray that it will work. Prayer is powerful. Prayer does help. But also make it work. Make it work in little ways. Do comments and media or building your own media company, make it work in big ways, or becoming a lawyer or whatever. I hope this produces a lot of new lawyers who are interested in civil rights for the common person. That's what I really hope comes out of this. So I end this and I say subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark localnewsnow.com and be back with more later. Thank you.